I'm in San Francisco for the 50th anniversary Star Trek convention. It is December 9th through December 11th of 2016. This is a particularly special event for me because once upon a time, back in approximately 1970, in a rented house somewhere in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I can first recall watching this television show on my family's very first color television set. Now, my earliest remembrance of television in general is watching Neil Armstrong land on the moon, and we saw that on a black and white TV. So to be here now, so many years later, at this 50th anniversary of what amounts to a cultural phenomenon, it's really quite impressive. At the time I watched Kirk and Spock and all of these other fictional characters, I had no idea that they were going to become so important to pop culture. The TV series itself had only been canceled just a few years earlier, and life was in the process of changing for my family. The 1970s were starting off with something of a bang. There was a lot of civil rights going on. We had court-ordered busing, and women's rights were something of an issue, even in the headlines at that point. So there was no real indicator that Star Trek was going to be what you think of it as today. So here we are at the convention now, and we're seeing actors talk about their career histories from classic Trek through Star Trek The Next Generation, through Star Trek Voyager and Deep Space Nine, and now they're getting ready to debut an entirely new program, Star Trek Discovery. So this is certainly being a very eventful 21st century. Now, I certainly didn't forget about Star Trek Enterprise, and the reason I wanted to single that out in particular is that the early days of the American space race competing with the Soviets was particularly inspirational to me, and anyone who has read my work can tell you that there are some symbolism, there are some direct allusions to that, and I don't mind saying that Star Trek played its own role in influencing the way I write about space today. When I think about the future, I have always framed it in terms of humans going to space, but the images we see in Star Trek are of humans and aliens going to space, so it's always conflict-driven. And that's really not out of bounds. Actually, it's quite inspiring to think that there's more than one thought process going to space. Here in 2016, we tend to think of the world in terms of liberal versus conservative, but as we've seen from several centuries worth of science fiction writers, there's actually more than one way to think of the universe. And if there's more than one way to imagine faster than light travel, there would be more than one way to govern a society. So someday, if we could ever harness the technology, we're likely to meet other societies that govern in different ways. So it makes perfectly good sense that we have to start thinking about how we handle ourselves here on planet Earth. And that's part of what has motivated me to be a writer.